Hi, thanks for joining us. I'm Monica DeWitt, Education Specialist at Community Resource Center, and I'm here with Tracy Lato-Smith of Volunteer Management Consulting. And Tracy, thanks for joining me for mobilizing volunteers to meet the moment. CRC's values of stewardship, community, collaboration, and acknowledgement that the roles and responsibilities of Colorado nonprofit sector is continuing to be challenged and tested. So today we're here to talk about ways nonprofits can and should mobilize volunteers to meet the growing needs of our communities in a time when nonprofit capacity is limited. And I couldn't think of a more fitting person to have this conversation with. I met Tracy when CRC participated in the C Redirect cohort that focused on volunteer management, and Tracy was our guide. So I'll turn it over to you.
You so much for having me, Monica. I'm always thrilled to talk about how nonprofits can be more thoughtful about volunteer engagement, and how putting a little bit of time in on the front end, assessing our needs, drafting position descriptions, creating systems for onboarding volunteers, that kind of stuff, how that can really pay dividends in terms of the quality of the experience that you provide to your volunteers and the impact that they're able to have in your work. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So before we dive into the volunteer side of things, wanted to take some time to define what we mean by meeting the moment and what nonprofits might be thinking about in this moment in particular in March 2026. So current events that are guiding today's conversation are specific to the changes in SNAP benefits. So if you're not familiar with SNAP, it's the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program that helps low-income households purchase food. So SNAP and eligibility is based on income, resources, household size. 1 in 8 Americans receive these benefits. And the majority of these households have income that are below the poverty line, which is $33,000 for a family of four. So, with the passage of H.R. 1, also known as the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, that passed quite a few months ago, the federal government has changed the work requirements for SNAP recipients who are considered able-bodied adults without dependents. So the SNAP work requirements in Colorado have been significantly tightened due to federal changes, expanding the mandatory 80-hour monthly work or training or volunteering rules for those able-bodied adults without independence to ages 18 to 64. It was previously 18 to 54, so including much more of the population. These rules also phased out previous exemptions for veterans, homeless individuals, and those aging out of foster care. So these expanding work requirements could put thousands more SNAP recipients at risk of losing their benefits if they don't meet those work and activity requirements. And the work/activity, because it also includes volunteering. So nonprofits working in food access and food insecurity are being significantly impacted by these changes. Both the increase in demand for emergency food services, like think food pantries, meal services, the administrative programming costs to help clients understand these new rules, the exemptions, document compliance to avoid the loss of their benefit. But we also anticipate nonprofits being impacted with an influx of folks looking to volunteer in order to fulfill those new work requirements, in order to keep their benefits. So, seeing nonprofits impacted in multiple ways, just keeping that in mind about this moment as we continue our conversation. But Tracy, turning it back to you, how do you think volunteers could meet our current moment?
As most nonprofits and nonprofit professionals can probably attest, the support of committed, well-trained volunteers can really make all the difference in the world in terms of an organization's ability to achieve their mission, meet their goals, and make a difference in their community, especially in times like these. So we sometimes talk about doing more with less. And that probably feels very true as funding and SNAP benefits are decreasing right now. And demand for our services or for organization services is increasing. The reality is that engaging volunteers in our work allows us to do more with more, right? More hands, more hearts working to feed more people in your organization. So that's a little bit of a change in mindset. We're always trying to do more with less, but if we think about engaging these volunteers as helping us be able to do more with more, that helps us meet this moment, right? But organizations really have to be prepared for those volunteers. We need to put in a little bit of work on the front end to make sure that we're prepared for our volunteers or for new volunteers, that we're equipped to provide the best possible experience for our volunteers, and also ensure that what we're asking them to do for us is meaningful, that it's mission focused, and that it's a good use of their time. There's a quote that I always like to share in my trainings. It's from a publication from an organization called the Grantmaker Forum on Community and National Service that has since been absorbed by another organization. But I think this quote is really relevant. It says, "Without adequate nonprofit capacity to receive and engage volunteers, a call to service risks drawing potential volunteers into disappointing or frustrating experiences that can discourage them from volunteering in the future." And that's the last thing we want to do, right? We want to make sure that we're ready to receive and engage new volunteers and give them the best possible experience with our organization so that they stick around and they keep making a difference in our communities. Even if they determine that volunteering with my organization isn't the right fit for them, they now, hopefully, after engaging with us a little bit, know a little more about what we do. They can promote our services in the community. They can send other volunteers who might be a better fit towards us. And hopefully, if I've at least had a good experience, even making that determination that this isn't the right volunteer opportunity for me, I'm still motivated to go out and look for other volunteer opportunities that might be a better fit. So a little bit of preparation goes a long way.
I know that was something I appreciated the most, participating in the C redirect cohort. And Tracy, you know, the sentiment of slowing down to speed up, I think is really powerful too. So, anticipating this influx of volunteers, what advice do you have about creating management and tracking systems for nonprofit volunteers?
So you've created a really terrific packet of resources that you're sharing with folks alongside this video. And that packet really provides some great simple overviews of some of the basics of volunteer engagement. And I wanted to sort of start with a couple of the resources in that packet. It's a great place to start. So I always encourage organizations to start by assessing how they're currently using volunteers alongside how they could be using volunteers. And to that end, you have a couple of resources in the packet on what I call volunteer needs and program assessment. So it's not just a needs assessment, because we actually want to start by how do we currently use volunteers? And that's a key question to ask and answer alongside how could we be using volunteers. So the first document that I wanted to, or worksheet that I wanted to highlight from the packet is, I think, just called Needs and Program Assessment, but it includes some key internal questions that are really valuable for organizations to consider. And then there's another activity worksheet for identifying meaningful volunteer opportunities for volunteers that I think can be really valuable as organizations are trying to figure out, we've got all these new volunteers coming our way. We have all this work we need to get done, but sometimes there's not a really easy connection between what needs to happen and what volunteers can help us with. And that worksheet helps you sort of make some lists of all the things that need to get done, all the things that just aren't getting done because there aren't enough hours in the day, all the things that we wish we could do if we had more time, more talent, more expertise, and then maybe taking pieces of each of those columns and creating a list of things that maybe volunteers could help us do. So that's a great place to start in terms of figuring out how volunteers can help. From there, you want to create clear written position descriptions for volunteers. When I train organizations, I talk about that I think that volunteer position descriptions are one of, if not the most important piece of volunteer engagement infrastructure that you can invest time into creating. Or updating in your organization. These are such important documents because they serve a lot of different purposes for us, both internal and external, to help us create clarity for both the organization and the volunteers about what our various roles are, what our respective roles are, what the expectations are, what we are expecting from our volunteers, and what our volunteers can expect from us, and what the purpose of this volunteer role is and how it connects to the larger mission of the organization. So in the packet, Monica, you've provided both a template and a sample of a good volunteer position description to make it easy for organizations to create these documents, or maybe update the documents that they have to include a few other key pieces of information that might be important to have included there. And once you have position descriptions, or at least one clear description of a volunteer role that you're looking to fill, you can use that for volunteer recruitment to make sure that your messaging is clear and descriptive and specific. You can also use that document to inform supervision, to inform evaluation. It gives your volunteers and your organization all the information you need, all in one place, to make sure that you're prepared for volunteers, that you're meeting each other's expectations, and that you're building a good relationship, because that's what volunteer cultivation is, and engagement is a relationship between the volunteer and your organization that you hope is going to be a long-term one. That's not always the case. Sometimes we're recruiting volunteers for a one-time volunteer role, and that's fine too. Even if your position description is just half a page, putting it in writing to say, what are we asking our volunteers to do? They're going to staff the check-in table at this fundraising walk, making sure that you know that you're going to need supplies, that you're going to need a table, that you're going to need chairs, that you're going to need pen and paper, those kinds of things, so that you're prepared on the day of. That is all the kind of stuff that can go into a position description also, at least a really comprehensive one that you just then take the pieces of information that you need. So those are a few great places to start.
Yeah, yeah. And a takeaway, like you're building a relationship with a person who is investing time and energy into your organization. And so just thinking about those initial touch points and how important they are, whether it's on a volunteer recruitment website and what they're reading, but then also thinking about onboarding and, making sure that your first in-person interaction is successful too. So what advice do you have for a new volunteer onboarding?
Yeah. So, as I've said, we always want to make sure that we're prepared for our volunteers. We want to use their time wisely. It's so important that we're ready for our volunteers when they arrive. So, I encourage organizations to put some systems in place that make the onboarding process as streamlined as possible, and starting even with that first point of contact. What happens when a new prospective volunteer from the community contacts your organization? I always tell organizations, what is your response time? Do an audit of, and maybe even have a current volunteer act as sort of a mystery shopper to inquire and give you feedback on what the process was like.
I love that
So
idea.
yeah. So how quickly can you get back to inquiring volunteers? Do you have a reply template created so that you can really easily copy and paste the basic information that a person needs in order for them to gather what they need to know about your organization, about your volunteer opportunities, and whatever the next steps are to get involved? So that's one small step that you can do that might make a big difference in your volunteers' experience from their very first point of contact with you, is to try and create those templates. Um, also included in the packet is a volunteer project preparation worksheet. If you or others in your organization are a little overwhelmed with how to prepare for new volunteers, that's a worksheet that can help you consider the various things that you need to think about before the volunteer arrives so that you have all the information in one place to get them started when they get there that day.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really helpful. Going back to acknowledging the challenging times that nonprofits are experiencing, just curious if you had to pick like the simple few tangible action steps that we want to make sure nonprofits take, what would they be?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot that goes into volunteer engagement and volunteer management, as anyone who does it knows. So the first thing that I would say is to give yourself some grace, to try not to feel overwhelmed by all that you could do to build a more robust volunteer program in your organization. In this particular moment, maybe it's about considering what small changes you might be able to start making, maybe using some of the information and the tools from the packet that might make a big difference in both your volunteers' experience and your organization's experience in engaging them. So maybe it is creating a written position description for the first time, using that template. So all you're having to do is fill in the blanks. Or maybe it's updating some templates or some descriptions that you already have. Maybe it's creating that inquiry response template so that you are making sure that you're providing clear and consistent messaging to everyone that inquires with your organization. So it's just, thank you so much for your interest in our organization or in volunteering with our organization. Our mission statement is X. Our volunteer opportunities include Y. Here are the next steps if you're interested in volunteering. And you know that everyone who inquires is getting that basic information and clear instructions about what the next steps are, whether that's attending an information session or an orientation or submitting an application. And here's a link to the application or scheduling an interview, whatever it is, or just signing up and providing some basic information in your organization's sign up process for a shift at the food pantry, that kind of thing. Maybe it's just making sure that your volunteers feel appreciated by making sure that you're including a thank you in every communication that you have with your volunteers, email, text message, voicemail, and in person, and making sure that message of gratitude is coming from others in your organization as well, not just from the one person assigned to be the manager of volunteers or who's assigned that responsibility. So start small, try not to feel overwhelmed by big changes. Even some small experiments and how you work with volunteers can make a really big difference in the important work that you're doing in the community.
Yeah, and what I hear you saying, Tracy, too, is also like trust what you have established. You know, don't recreate the wheel. You know,
Exactly.
what's in your folders? What do you already have started? I hear you saying that too, and
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
again, the slow down to speed up. Sometimes we forget that we don't have to restart. Yeah. Well, this was so great, Tracy. Wondering how listeners can stay connected with you and learn more.
Yeah. Well, folks can reach out to me directly. I think that maybe you'll be able to provide my contact information or through my website, which is just volunteermanagementconsulting.com. You can also find information about trainings that I offer, some of which are underwritten by a nonprofit partner that I work with called Redirect. Some of those trainings even include grant funding. So you can find information about those opportunities on the training section of my website. But please don't ever hesitate to reach out if you have questions or if I can help at all. I also work directly with organizations one-on-one to provide customized professional development, training, and coaching for nonprofits of all different sizes. So thanks so much for inviting me to talk today, Monica.
Of course. Thanks, Tracy. Thanks for sharing your expertise and your time. Okay.